Hey YouTube, I am Dr. Daniel Kaplan, and my mission is to make psychology accessible to all. In today's video, we are going to talk about distinguishing between personality and behavior, which is one of the more essential skills that a couple must learn in order to navigate conflict. So let's get into it. Paul Rogers once said, people are just as beautiful as sunsets if you let them be. When I look at a sunset, I don't find myself saying, soften the orange a bit on the right-hand corner. I don't try and control the sunset. I watch with awe as it unfolds. I think this quote is the cornerstone of learning how to embrace your the whole partner. There are going to be aspects of your partner that you like more than others, but radical acceptance, or accepting all of who they are, is one of the skills that we will talk about. But we do have to distinguish between personality and behavior. So we're going to talk about what personality is. We're going to talk a little bit about radical acceptance through the prism of personality. Then we'll talk a little bit about behavior. And then I'll end with some thought-provoking questions and some cognitive exercises. So what is personality? Well, personality refers to the enduring characteristics and behavior that comprises a person's unique adjustment to life. Notice that we are talking about relatively stable aspects of the individual. Now, in all fairness, there are some psychologists like Walter Mischel and Darrell Bem who suggested otherwise, but the general consensus is personality is fairly stable. We might change some aspects of ourselves, but our core essence will remain pretty much unchanged. So what are the aspects that comprise a person? Well, this might include your major traits, your interests, drives, that's your motivation, your value system, your self-concept, your abilities, and your emotional patterns. All of these are part of who a person is, or a personality, what a person is, right? Interesting to note, you do not see behavior on the list, right? Because we are going to distinguish between behavior and personality. So personality traits are unique to the individual. They oftentimes reflect the intrapsychic aspect of a person. That is what's happening within or inside of a person. As I mentioned, they tend to be fairly stable characteristics, which lead a person to behave in predictable ways. For example, let's say I chose a wife, but it could be a wife or a husband. A wife might struggle to form friendships as a result of certain characteristics or traits, such as being shy or anxious. Whereas another person might be outgoing and relish in spending time with their friends. Being shy and anxious is going to result in a person distancing themselves from others. These are characteristics of the individual. Whereas being extroverted, as I describe on the bottom, this person is going to approach others and want to be around others. And that character trait of extroversion is going to draw them in. So we have to know who we are. We have to know or learn who our partner is. And this is going to help us navigate environments and situations we wind up in. So why is it important? Why is it important for you to know who your partner is? Well, identifying central aspects of your partner's character is absolutely critical for a healthy relationship. And what we tend to see when we're doing couples therapy is some people will fight their partner or try and get their partner to change. And more often than not, this is fruitless because either your partner is going to change certain aspects of who they are, but develop resentments because they feel that you force them to change under duress. Or what happens if they don't change? You might come to resent your partner because of their quote unquote resistance to change. So trying to get your partner to change could result in resentment towards them or resentment from them towards you. So we do have to know what is part of our partner's characteristics. Now, uh, examples of errors people make in relationships. So you might consistently nag your spouse, believing that by nagging them, they will change. You might also find yourself disappointed by the choices other people make, assuming that you have more control over that than you do. You might feel resentful of things that have happened in the past, even though you cannot change the past, and you might hold on to grudges. So these are all relationship patterns that are not helpful. These are common errors people make in relationships, whether it be romantic or otherwise. I'm calling attention to these, but there are so many others. So, but is there a solution to us trying to change our partner or resenting our partner or our partner resenting us because we want them to change in a way that they're just not changing? Well, yeah, of course there is. There is a concept called radical acceptance. Now, radical acceptance comes from multiple different philosophies of life. If we think of Carl Rogers, Carl Rogers used radical acceptance as he approached his clients. So I would say he loved his clients for who they are, as they are, with no strings attached. That is radical acceptance. So that isn't just a philosophy related to Carl Rogers, though. We see this as part of the Buddhist tradition as well, that we need to learn to accept situations that are outside of our control. Because if we don't accept the situations that we have no control over, then we're going to engage in distress and we're going to suffer because we haven't accepted the situation as it is. Which the premise is that suffering doesn't necessarily come directly from pain, but it's from one's attachment to the pain. So by accepting something, we let go of that pain. And I will say, as I bolded at the bottom, believe it or not, by not accepting your partner for who they are, you're actually causing suffering to yourself. You're inflicting suffering upon yourself by trying to control your partner. So that's radical acceptance. Now, is radical acceptance warranted in all situations? Of course not. So if you're in a relationship that has domestic violence in it, so you're in an abusive relationship, you don't have to say, no, I was told by Dr. Kaplan that I have to accept my partner as they are. No, you have to protect yourself in such a case. So if there's complete disrespect there, you certainly don't want to endure that. If you're being harassed, whether it be verbally, sexually, or what otherwise, or taken advantage of, or being mistreated at work, you don't have to accept that either, right? There are HR departments that can mediate the situation. If you're experiencing burnout, right, or lack of motivation with the current situation, the body is telling you something. Perhaps maybe trying to accept it is not happening, or you're struggling with it. Or if your radical acceptance results in you not taking action due to fear. These are just a few examples where perhaps radical acceptance might not be okay. But the first bullet point is the most important one for our discussion today. Uh, Abuse, whether it be physical, emotional, sexual, doesn't matter. If you're experiencing that from your partner, go. Leave them as soon as possible, because most people do not change in that regard. So protect yourself. And that is not a situation where radical acceptance is warranted. So, another perspective when we're talking about personality and trying to get our partners to change. Well, cognitive behavioral therapists, people like Aaron Beck and David Burns, talked about cognitive distortions or cognitive errors. And one cognitive error is the fallacy of change, which is when you expect other people to change their ways to suit your expectations or your needs, especially if you pressure them enough. That's a fallacy. You cannot make another person change. The only person you have control over that you could possibly change is yourself. So be careful with the fallacy of change. So, what's behind this fallacy of change? More often than not, a person believes that if they pressure their partner to change, then it's going to create a sense of happiness. Or they might create a contingency that their happiness is dependent upon the person changing. So they're going to fight more to get their partner changed than they would ordinarily. So this is an error, though. Of course, we have to embrace the aspect of our partner, that which is personality. But you might say, okay, you said we're going to talk about personality and behavior. So, what about behavior? Behavior refers to what you do, not who you are. So, when we talked about personality, we were talking about your essence, what makes you unique, those values and characteristics you have. This is more about who you are. When it comes to behavior, it's what you do. Now, that being said, behavior is linked to how an individual comes across to others in their actions. So you can see that behavior, when we're trying to judge another person, it's in their actions. It's what they do, and our behavioral characteristics refer to the way a person acts or reacts in a particular situation and to their surroundings in general. So notice how behavior is more of a reflection of personality in context. And when I say in context, I'm talking about the situation or environment. So, as I mentioned on the previous slide, behavior has more of an interpersonal component. It's relationship to others, what we do and how we speak to others. It's also situation dependent. And what's cool about this, remember how I talked to you about radical acceptance when it comes to personality? You don't have to have radical acceptance about behavior, because behaviors can change. So if there's something a person can do about it, we expect them to do something about it. If it's who they are, we can't expect them to change their personality. So let's give an example of behavior and potential behavior change. Let's say a person likes to leave their shoes uh, around the house. So they come home from work, they kick their shoes off, and now their shoes are, you know, all over the living room. So their partner is more organized and tidy, and their partner might feel that this is somehow disrespect because the house is no longer organized and tidy. Is that personality for a person to kick their shoes off anywhere they want, or is that a behavior? Well, the answer is it's a behavior. Uh, it's changeable. All we need to do is put a spotlight on it, talk about it, and understand why it's important for our partner that we address this. If we were to try and label it as personality or character, it might come across as contempt for our partner, such as our partner is lazy or sloppy or careless. Notice how we're labeling the whole character of an individual. That's not right, because this is something simple, it's behavioral, and it can change. So I always ask my couples to think about when they're in conflict, are we fighting over something that is changeable or not? Is this part of their character or is this a behavior? And that's incredibly important because how we approach this is going to differ. So here is our personality and behavior by comparison. Personality, generally speaking, is what or who we are, whereas behavior is what we do. Personality, generally speaking, cannot change, it's relatively stable, and behavior can change, right? So we talked about personality as consistent patterns, thoughts, a consistent pattern of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, whereas behavior specifically is, as I said, an expression of personality in context. So it's not stable, it's situation dependent. So I want to try and get us thinking more practically. So, if you and your partner are struggling to determine if the issue you're discussing is personality or behavior, that should be the first question you ask. Ask yourself, is this a behavioral issue or is it related to personality? And that first question will determine whether you move forward. If you decide that this is a personality characteristic, then the work is on you to determine whether you can accept it or not. It's not on your partner. We cannot force our partners to change personality. If it's a behavioral issue, then we can have a meaningful conversation with our partner. And remember, avoid contempt, right? For our partner. So ease into the conversation with a soft startup, as we talked about in a previous video from John Gottman. So you want to approach it that way. Another question you could ask, getting at the same thing through a different prism, is this central to your partner's identity? If this is central to your partner's identity, then that is more about their personality. If it's not central to their identity, then it's probably related to behavior. A third question you could ask yourself is, when I evaluate my partner, is this a consistent behavior across situations? Because if it's consistent across situations, then we're dealing with personality. But if it fluctuates from situation to situation, that's behavior, because behavior, as I said, was situation dependent. Then you have to ask yourself the tough question: is this something your partner is capable of changing? Now, this, if it's personality, for sure, that's not something your partner is going to change. But even if it's behavioral, perhaps the individual hasn't learned the skills to change that behavior, or it's going to be just too hard to change that behavior. So you have to ask yourself, is my partner capable of changing this aspect of who they are, this behavior? If you feel that it isn't going to cause considerable distress to your partner to push them to change this aspect of who they are, then have the conversation. If it's going to cause considerable distress, even if it's not personality, maybe we let some of this go. Because in relationships, not everything can be a battle. We have to embrace some aspects of our partner and not pick that fight. Because I guarantee you, if you're in a long term committed relationship, you will see many flaws in your partner. And your job is to learn to embrace the whole person, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Embrace all their flaws. Now, that brings me to the last question is this something I can engage in radical acceptance about? Now, I talked to you about certain things that you don't have to embrace or accept. Radical acceptance isn't for everything. But if this is a non threatening behavior that is just one of the quirks of my partner, can I learn to love them with it? Can I accept them as they are? These 5 questions will help you in terms of addressing this with your partner or not. This is a roadmap, people. It gives you the direction that you need to decide, do I address this with my partner or not? So, when we talk about radical acceptance, let's talk about some steps you can take to develop radical acceptance of your partner. The first thing I would say is pay attention to what triggers resistance, because that might be an indicator that, hey, you're struggling to accept this thing, or perhaps this may not be something you can engage in radical acceptance with. 2, you can remind yourself that in this moment, reality can't be changed. So let's say we had a couple that had romantic partners prior to one another. We are going to have to embrace who they are as they come into the situation. We may not like our partner's exes or even the number of exes they have, but we can't change it. So at this point, we cannot go back in time. And as a function of that, reality cannot be changed. So we have to embrace reality as it is. You also have to remind yourself that there are causes for this reality that are outside of your control, right? You may not be able to control the decision-making process of your partner. And sometimes it may not even be your partner that's driving this. It might be the environment that you're in. So we don't always have control over everything. Or I want you to think about what you would do if you were able to accept what happened. And then do the things as though you had already accepted them. So this is kind of a fake it until you make it approach. Imagine what things would be like if you accepted the situation. So these are imagery techniques. You might also engage in some journaling, whether it be self reflection or journaling, or you might engage in mindfulness activities, which is connected to being in the present without judgment. 7, you might let yourself feel the emotions in a safe way. That may not be going at your partner. It might be saying, hey, I am upset. I need some time to feel my emotions. I will I will talk to you in a day or two or whatever the time frame is. Pay attention to how these emotions are resonating in your body. The body keeps the score. That is a book, and we talk about post traumatic stress disorder. Your body will communicate uncomfortability. So ask yourself, is there any tightness, pain, or restriction? 9, you could accept that life can be worthwhile even when you're experiencing pain. Perhaps the pain hasn't gone away just yet, but you can live life to the fullest, excuse me, even when experiencing pain. And then 10, decide to commit to a practice of acceptance whenever resistance comes up again. Now, that last one is important because you may have resistance, you may work through the resistance, and then you might be in a situation that triggers it again. Like if you see one of your partner's exes at a birthday party, that could bring things back. And just be mindful that, okay, I am working towards accepting this. I did a good job before, but the emotions are coming back up for me. Your partner is not responsible for your emotions when they come back up, though. It will be your job to navigate that. So, these are behavioral activities or steps you can take towards radical acceptance. What are some things on a cognitive level you can say to yourself? Self talk or coping strategies. Here are examples of some things that you might say to yourself. When I fight against negative emotions, I only fuel them to grow larger. This is true. It's kind of like telling a person, don't think of a purple elephant. The first thing you're going to do is think about a purple elephant. So fighting against or trying to suppress emotions don't work. Carl Jung also stated this principle before. Another statement you could say to yourself is, I can't change the things that have happened in the past, right? So that's related to, struggling with the radical acceptance about a partner's past. Uh, Another thing you could say is, I'm able to accept the present moment exactly as it is. So perhaps separating the past and the present and saying, okay, I may not be happy with where we were or how we got here, but I'm going to accept the current moment as it is. I'm also going to acknowledge my emotions by saying I can get through the difficult emotions, even if it is hard. You might also say, I will survive this feeling, and this feeling will fade, even though it feels painful right now. Notice how you're talking to the part of you that doesn't want to let go, doesn't want to accept the person or the experience. You could also say it's possible for me to feel anxiety, but still manage the situation in an effective way. You might also say it's possible for me to accept what happened and still end up happy. Another thing you could say is, I can choose to make a new path, even if I feel bad. And lastly, another coping strategy is, when I remain rational, I'm better able to make good choices and solve problems. Because the emotional side of the mind will consume you otherwise, and we don't want that. So that is my video on distinguishing between personality and behavior in relationships. We talked about how to embrace another person's character or personality using radical acceptance. We talked about when radical acceptance was not appropriate. And then we differentiated between behavior and personality. After we did that, we concluded with some steps towards radical acceptance and some self-talk strategies. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe, click to my notifications tab. We're going to continue with a series on relationships. And I'm going to go back into John Gottman's work, and I'm going to talk about the 7 principles for making marriage work, or building a sound house in relationships. Until next time, take care, everybody.